2. We're going to be going over the destruction of Jerusalem, so go ahead and get out your history cards and we'll get started. I want you to turn to the very front of our cards where you see this huge upside down rainbow of sorts. And I want you to just put it to the side as you listen to me read something. Now remember, we had just gotten over studying Nero and his terrible villainous attitude towards God's people, the Christians. Jesus had ascended, had said, go into the world, preach the gospel to every nation, baptizing them, obey me, make sure that I am the center of your life. And then immediately after, 30 years after, they face persecution from one of the world's and history's most terrible villains. So now we're at 70 AD. 6 years after Nero is burning Christians, he's torturing Christians. And so Jerusalem, God's city, the chosen people, the land of the Israelites, the city where the sacred Jewish temple was located, the Romans, Nero's people, come in and completely destroy the temple. The entire city of Jerusalem is completely destroyed as well because the Jews did not want to pay taxes to Rome. This was an ongoing issue between the Jews and the Romans, and they had a lot of fights between them, just like we may have enemies as Americans, and they're going back and back and back and back and back, and finally Rome just said, we're tired of this. We're going to just set fire to all of the things that are important to you. If we're not important to you, then nothing should be important to you. Flames engulfed the temple and the walls of Jerusalem were laid waste, but the Romans spared a few of the buildings for future generations to see. So if you ever visit Jerusalem, I always kid that we should go on a trip to Jerusalem with all of us. But you can go and see some of the buildings that were still saved by the Romans during that time. Unfortunately, they didn't spare the Jewish people. According to Josephus, who was an ancient historian, perhaps millions of Jews were sold and thousands sold into slavery. The Romans were not sorry for their actions. This was a dark time where they did not think that they did anything wrong. But not only did they think that they did nothing wrong, they celebrated their victory over both the Jews and the Christians. It was a terribly rough time right after Jesus was crucified and rose to life and had this miraculous thing happen, this big, huge event in history, and now they have persecution of Christians and the destruction of Jerusalem. You can imagine how the Jews are feeling at this moment. Wondering why them, why were they God's chosen people? Only because they did not want to obey Rome. We're going to go ahead and read the card together because I want you to hear my voice as I read this, and I want to go over some of the new concepts with you in case you don't understand. In 70 AD, the Jews finally rebelled against Roman rule. They said they would not obey Rome or pay her money. The emperor Vespasian sent his son Titus with an army to put an end to the rebellion. This Emperor Vespasian said, I'm tired of this. I want you to go. I'm sending you, my son, my heir to the throne. Go and make the Jews pay for this. The Jews crowded into the city, and they fought during the day and struggled to rebuild the walls of the city at night. So these Jews are trying to defend. We've talked about what defending means. They defended their city, and in the night, they're building their walls, making sure that no one is able to come into them. So they're not sleeping, they're not eating, they're just barely surviving. Eventually, so after some time, the Romans broke through the walls and the Jews went to defend the temple. The soldiers burned the temple. Now remember, the temple, we've been talking about this in chapel, was God's house. It was God's place. It was his place of worship. And at this point, because Jesus had already come, he had already paid the penalty, anyone could go into the temple and make things right with God. But that picture of religiosity, this picture of respect to God was completely over. The remaining Jews, not only were they taken, their big temple was taken, the remaining Jews were killed or they were sold into slavery. To celebrate their victory, the Romans built an ark in the Roman Forum. Remember what a forum is, showing Titus and his army leaving the city of Jerusalem with the sacred menorah. That's that upside down rainbow that I talked to you about. The bottom part of it is the stick that you would hold that menorah. And on the top of those arches, you would have candles, and that is a huge symbol of Jewish culture and Jewish living. Many believe this event is what John wrote about in the book of Revelation and what Jesus predicted would happen to the disobedient Jewish race. So a lot of people thought this is the end of the world. Jerusalem is coming to an end, but we obviously know that 70 AD there was a lot of time to be lived. So I want to just ask you, what can you learn from the Jews in this moment? Is it always good to disobey the government? What would have happened if they would have paid Rome her money? I want you to think about that as you fill out your worksheet. Remember to have your best handwriting. I want it to be complete sentences, and I don't want you to rush. This is something that you really need to think through and study as you fill out your worksheet. Have a great day.